Hello, the internet. My guest today is the man they call the Godfather of alternative comedy, Tony Allen, comedian and writer. Tony was the MC at the Comedy Store in the early days when it just began. He is also the author of the book Attitude. Want to make something of it? The secret of stand-up comedy. How you doing, Tony?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Am I saying that right?
Well, you're saying I wasn't the original compere at a Comedy Store. It's just that I did some of the nights when Alexei Sale couldn't, you see.
Oh, okay.
He was a lazy bastard and only wanted to do Saturdays for the
really?
glory, and then I did the other nights, you see. It worked like that. So, yeah. And I don't mind you mispronouncing the title of my book.
Because before, in the pre-recording, you were saying I was putting the emphasis wrong on.
Yeah, but because
want to make something of it.
Yeah, well, it's
how should I say
something of it? You know, it's like do you want to make something of your attitude?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's
I thought it was like I was trying to start a fight. Yeah.
Well, it is both of them, really. What you've got to try and do is do both of them, but with the
simultaneously.
same.
I see what you're saying.
Which is impossible. I just wanted to see you try.
That sounds good to me. So you normally with the show we start off looking at where you were born, but you want to jump in straight to because you ran away from home, right?
No. Where did you get this from?
You told me that.
But you're not supposed to tell people stuff off the camera, are you? No, I never did that.
So all right.
No.
So when you didn't run away from home, you moved to London.
Yeah.
You were born in Hayes, right?
Grew
up in Hayes.
Yeah, in West London.
Yeah.
But actually, you could say west of London, really.
Yeah, that's very far out.
People that know where you come from, they say that's not West London, that's west of London. Yeah.
But we're going to jump. We're going to jump straight in, aren't we? And go to skip the early life, and we're going to go straight to straight to here, which is where are we?
Well, that's very odd. It doesn't look like that at all. That lorry's certainly not there. Right. There, that's believe it or not, this is Westbourne Park Road.
All right. So this is like kind of West London.
But you want to come round, face this way. That's it. Oh, look there. See, that's where I sort of moved into, and that was a block of tenements. You see, there's some there.
So it was
similar to that. They were there. You see,
but it's been knocked down.
But all that was knocked down. Yeah.
And how old were you when you moved out of your family home in
I was a young stripling of 27 or something like that.
All right. Yeah. So you ran away from home at 27.
Yeah.
I really want to know what happened in these previous years now.
No, you have to. No, we don't.
But that remains veiled in dark, in secrecy.
Well,
all right.
It's not that. It's you just can't talk about other people's lives, can you?
I hear you saying.
Yeah.
That's fine.
My mother would, well, she's dead now, but she'd still be on at me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I moved into a theatre group that were based there in those tenements, in a squat on that site. But that's all been knocked down. That was knocked down 2 years later.
So that was a big thing, wasn't it, in the 80s? Not so much now.
Yeah.
And what kind of characters would you have living in that squat?
That's the early 70s.
Oh, was it? Okay.
80s. Yeah, no.
Been generous.
Yeah.
So what sort of people were you living with then?
I lived with a guy called Bruce Birchall, who was a sort of activist and a theatre group. He did sort of street theatre.
Yeah.
And that's what that pub there. That's where I did my first. That's the British Oak. It was then. It's now called the Oak.
Just the Oak. Got rid of the British.
They're just into everything's reduced to. It's actually you can't go in there and buy a pint now. I don't think it's very expensive.
Oh, really?
But that upstairs room was where I did my audition for the West London Theatre Workshop.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically we used to just go around to demos and anywhere where there was trouble to be caused, we would go around there and sort of have funny placards and if there was people demonstrating, we'd make them demonstrate more sort of ambitiously.
Yeah.
And call it theatre. we just causing trouble basically with a smile on our faces, which I've done ever since. Really, I think it was very good training. Really.
And how did that sort of avant-garde theatre? How did that transform into like the comedy scene?
No, that's 72. That's 1972, and you're up the road now. You're up the posh
Yeah,
end now.
we're walking. We're just.
I don't know. You got to come back this way.
You want me to come back?
Oh
All right,
no,
all
you
right.
got to go up.
You're the
other,
boss man. You
right,
tell me.
Right, we go down this road, right?
You tell me where you would like to.
So
go.
this is past this. It's the number 7 bus route. Now there, past this. Carry on straight down the road. And so there's the British Oak on the corner where I did my audition, and there was about 3 people in there, and I was the most likely. And then there's this is where the houses were,
Yeah,
and
that's
all
where you
been
lived.
knocked down, yeah. And then there was bit information on this corner, and that was all squats up there. And then no, don't go up there. And then we go down here, you see, and this is Westbourne Park Road, and yeah. So, and this is where I live now, but it doesn't look like this. This all looks so suburban on here, doesn't it?
That doesn't look that suburban.
Yeah, it's a few kids done some graffiti, very nice too. Anyway, so yeah, so if you carry on down here, I'll show you where we used to do a lot of performing.
All right.
See? It looks very narrow now, but there's buses go down here. You wouldn't think buses could cross here. We'll have to back up in a minute while we
So,
come along.
Yeah,
So that's All Saints Road.
We don't want to get done
there,
for speeding.
That's All Saints Road, just
Down there, yeah.
Yeah.
So how, so you've always lived in this area of London?
Yeah, always.
So it must have changed massively.
Absolutely.
What could I expect to see?
These houses were in those days were hard to squat, right? Not hard to let. They were hard to squat.
Yeah.
Now they're all worth well between sort of 5 and 7 million each.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And that one there.
And when you say it's hard to squat, why were they hard
because
to squat?
that was the main drug dealing street in All Saints Road.
Okay.
So this is Portobello Road. So if you do that, do a right.
Down there?
As if yeah. So this is Portobello Road on a quiet day, and we used to mess around down here doing street theatre in 1972, 73, and just underneath the bridge up here was where I did my first full-length play, Al Fresco. So this.
And what were the themes of
So I used to.
Al Fresco?
I wrote nuclear waste fades your genes on that because they used to sell jeans here, but obviously it was spelled out. Stay here.
Yeah.
And then Banksy overdid it with something else.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So where was it written?
On the other side of that wall.
Oh, really?
Oh, as soon as you mention Banksy, you want all the details. Forget
nuclear
it.
waste fades your genes.
Fucker. Anyway, look. So here, this place here. No. Go back. Go back. See this little bit here. That there. That's where I did a full length play.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's perfect.
Yeah, we did a full-length play there called "The Heart of a Patriot," and and it was like a half busking and half a play.
I'm guessing you didn't ask for permission to do this. You're just
no, we put what you have to put in like 3 months ahead, and
you did, yeah.
No, of course we did.
Right.
Oh God!
So you did. So you just set up.
Yeah, we didn't set
hat,
up, and yes, but I didn't get much in it. But we did. I mean, it was a whole learning process, man. I didn't understand what we were doing really. They took me because I was an anarchist, not because I was a good theatre practitioner. It was because I was a fellow radical. So yeah. So most of the time we would just go to demos and behave badly and call it theatre, and sort of and make really interesting placards rather than smash the state. We'd have sort of silly things up there, But we actually did a full-length play for 1 hour and 20 minutes, I think it was there, and friends of ours, stood there and watched the whole thing.
Wow! But you sound surprised at that.
Oh man. We should have been. Someone should have told us.
So what sort of because it's hard for me to think because that stuff doesn't really happen in London anymore. If I was going to watch one of those plays, what type of thing could I expect to see? Was there a narrative or was it?
There used to be things called agitprop play, agitprop street theatre. In fact, there was even a group called that, and we were as much taking the mickey out of that and the tropes of that as we were of the political situation. So
okay,
yeah.
So that was like a kind of avant-garde thing, and you were taking the piss out of that.
Well, I don't know about avant-garde. It was a lefty thing, and we were taking the piss out of it as well. You know, I mean, obviously we were still taking the piss out of the general situation. Yeah. So now you're going further north. You don't want to do that.
Where do you want me to go? Tell me.
Where do we want to go
You're
now?
in charge of this journey, Tony.
Well,
sometimes I just wander off.
So also, the other thing I did at that time was Speaker's Corner.
Oh, yeah.
So on a Sunday, we would go to Speaker's Corner.
Let's have a look at that.
Of course, I'm
there you go.
Oh, you've just got there all of a
Speakers
sudden.
of this.
See, that looks nothing like that either. That looks like a suburban park, doesn't it? Well, where you are actually now, where your sort of camera spot is, that's the old site of... If you go back, can you reverse?
Reverse. Oh no! I've gone to the sky.
Oh wow, that's good.
Having an out-of-body experience.
See there, look, see.
What?
Go there. Yes, that's good. Good. Yeah. Well, no, on that island, that traffic island. See that traffic island. There's a little mark. That little thing there. That's it. Good. Well done. That says here is the site of Tyburn Tree. And that's where Tyburn Tree, the gallows were there, and
on this thing here.
Not in 1973, but in sort of up until about 1760, they would hang people there every month.
Oh, really?
They would sort of, there was a gallows with 3 places to hang people. And there would be enormous crowds there to watch.
Yeah. And that was their own type of street theatre, I guess.
I suppose so, yeah. But they had a lot of other types of street theatre as well, because they were just threatening to riot all the time, basically.
So you're quite into that, aren't you? The sort of history of comedy, right?
Well, I'm into the history of sort of street behaviour and the edges of performance, and I like all that, yeah. And just there, that's the edge of Oxford Street there, you see, that's the beginning of Oxford Street. And in the late 18, when would that be? Sort of late 18th century, there was a guy called, oh God, his name's, well, we're not going to talk about him now because I can't remember his name. And he used to sell pamphlets about sort of eating the rich and everything off of a barra. And but he wasn't very charismatic, unfortunately. But he had radical ideas, really interesting ideas. He should have come over, crossed over, and joined the others, because then there was a major upheaval in the park and they decided that they wanted to. They had a demonstration in the park, and then they decided they want to stay there. So they kept, that became when Speaker's Corner became Speaker's Corner. And
really?
Something like 1780 something.
So for people, we should elaborate on that. For people who don't know, what is Speaker's Corner?
Speaker's Corner, it'd be nice if you'd have gone there. Well, you haven't done this, but on every Sunday, actually, it went right up to there at the time. Although no, that's Marble Arch. And that's
over here, isn't it?
Yeah, the only reason that's there is because it's too narrow to be put in front of Buckingham Palace.
We zoom up.
It's just a bad architectural thing.
So what's Speaker's Corner? What happens
there? It is. That's the old Speaker's Corner. Speaker's Corner happens under those trees. Oh, that's very good. Well done. And this is it says Speaker's Corner. And every Sunday people go there and speak. And
And the idea is like a free platform where you can talk about anything, right?
Well, yeah, you'd thought so, yes. So that's exactly what happens. Yeah.
And what if I went there in the sort of 70s when you were doing it? What kind of...
I still do. I did it yesterday.
Did it yesterday? All right.
Yeah.
So what stuff, what do you talk about when you're there?
Well, yesterday I was talking about the necessity for cryptocurrencies to overthrow the fiat currencies. Yeah.
Cryptocurrency.
Have you got cryptocurrencies?
I haven't.
Oh, well,
I've got a friend that keeps telling me to.
No, you should
invest in them.
Well, listen to him or her and do it. Yeah, you need it. The dollar and the pound of their days are numbered.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I had a friend that was telling me about this just the other day.
This time next year, it will be in a different world. That's what I've been speaking about. Yeah, anything to sort of disrupt people's ideas, really. But that's what I speak about. Yeah.
And what other characters were there around?
Oh, there's all sorts of people there. There's an old black guy now that stands there, and he stands there in a Nazi uniform, totally immaculate. Really? Yeah, he's just like he's having a laugh. At least I hope it is. Well, I'm assuming he's having a laugh. And there's all sorts of other people as well. Yeah, lots of people go there. Yeah.
Wow, man.
And there's lots of Islamic people with the cameras, and they're always interviewing people.
Yeah,
And
you see that on YouTube.
And then you go to YouTube and you see yourself all edited wrongly.
Really?
And they've proved that you also believe in whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Man, you're probably on some like.
Oh, yeah. I'm
police watch list.
Probably the reason for somebody doing something awful as well. It's just you can get caught up in all sorts of things. So that's the park now. You don't want to go into the park.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Well, you could.
That's
I mean,
pretty.
you do
boring,
want to go into the park. It's beautiful.
So how is it a young man? If you've always lived in London, you must like it, right?
Yeah.
How is it as a young man? Like when you first arrived in London proper, because you grew up kind of on the outskirts.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
I used to go to Shepherd's Bush regular because my parents come from Shepherd's Bush. So,
yeah.
So, but well, I mean, the park was an education. I mean, lots of people say that. That's where I was educated, Speaker's Corner. Yeah, and still am, and people still are. I educate them now. I mean, you can go there and you can learn about anything. You start an argument with someone and people start talking to you and they'll gather around and everybody put their two penneth in. Still, that's what happens there. And you can just ask questions and people will answer them. There's a very interesting license that happens in that place. That's what is expected and that's what happens. So you can, if you start talking, people will gather around you and help you out.
So is it different? Do you speak about something different every time you go there?
Well, inevitably, yeah. Unlike you with your script just on the side of the camera.
That was just the intro. I'll turn that.
No. But but I can't do it otherwise. I can't do. That's what I didn't like about stand-up. That I got tired of hearing myself do the same thing. It's dull, very dull. But you can go there and shut your mouth up about anything. Yeah. Whatever sort of. I mean, you get into, obviously you use the same tropes sometimes. I mean, I'm always shouting out sort of bigger cages, longer chains, better consolation prizes, and people start arguing with you. So I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
So do you think that, like, those days in the Speaker's Corner, did that?
But this is like
did that give you a
driving
good start?
video. What are you doing?
I'm just strolling, man. This is what we do.
Oh, you're actually strolling.
And then you see some.
Oh, let's stroll down to the comedy store then.
Shall we? Yeah. And then we see something that piques our interest. You tell me where to go.
Well, it'll take us ages.
We'll have a few clicks.
Yeah, go on.
That's what the show's about.
We Park Lane. That's just
we
Park
wander
Lane,
around,
owned by millionaires from
talk
abroad.
about history. What's that? Is that?
Yeah.
I thought there was an abandoned sofa. No, it's not.
No,
it's
an
statue.
abandoned sofa in bloody Park Lane, man.
That's why I was surprised.
That's the second richest
that's why I wanted to
area
zoom
in London.
I was surprised why I was there. So being on Speaker's Corner,
yes,
that must have prepared you a lot for doing stand-up, right?
Of course, yeah. Well, you'd have thought so, but
Very
it
similar.
allowed...
It's much harder because you're outside. Man.
Oh, man, yes, it's difficult.
That's a tall ceiling.
In fact, Andy Zaltzman came down yesterday. That was fun.
Did he?
Yeah, he lost my audience for me.
Oh, really? Well,
No, we won't cut that out. We'll leave it in. Yeah, no, I promised him he could come down and try out, and he did.
Try out what?
Well, he had some stuff to say.
Yeah.
We're actually gonna go to the comedy store en route. Okay, turn left then.
You tell me where to go. Look.
This is 122 Piccadilly was parked there. That was a big squat in 1967, 68. It was a big house there. There's a hotel there now. That was one of the first squats of London on that corner. I didn't like it because it was too near Buckingham Palace. Well, if that's Piccadilly, I can't tell. It all looks like the suburbs with sort of a bit of Georgian Victorian trapping on it.
You keep saying this, that everywhere looks like the suburbs. How
it does.
This can't look that different to how it was before.
It's sort of. It doesn't look like I can just about recognise where we are. It seems the streets seem narrower. And for the most part, they seem very sort of. This is fine, isn't it? Yeah,
is this the right way?
A bit more obvious. No, just go straight down for a mile.
Yeah.
Go on, miles away.
Let's
Dave,
click. I'll do
just
fast
click
clicking.
on your click. Click on your click and go to Wardour Street. Piccadilly, this is.
I'm determined now to click all the way there.
Oh, right.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
All right.
You
This is
you
good.
enjoy doing this?
Yeah, this is what I do. Whether you're here or not, I just click
Oh, I
around.
see. I gathered.
What have you been up to, Dave? Oh, just clicking around.
Yeah, okay.
No big deal.
So you're just coming out to Piccadilly Circus now. Just past the old Xenon Club was there. I used to compare that as well.
Xenon Club.
Yeah, it was just some sort of nightclub where comedians used to work. Julian Clary used to work it a lot. Anyway, where are you now? I don't know where you've
Still
gone
Piccadilly.
Now, yeah,
Still Piccadilly. So if you're interested in the like the history of performing in London, because you're into like real old stuff, man. Because I heard you on another interview talking about, is it Grimaldi, that clown guy?
Yeah, that clown guy.
The clown guy.
Well, he's our sort of he's the man really. You know, going right back.
How do you think he'd do at the Gong Show?
Oh, he would kill. He would love it, you know, because he could walk on stage and organise and sort of work the audience, work the room without even saying anything. You know, he could mug and mimic his way through an hour if he wanted to. Well, I'm saying that. He's dead now. Why am I?
But you've read the history.
Yeah, I mean, he could sort of really get a room.
So that's the
And that's his main. That's why he's so brilliant. Is because that he could speak with every limb of his body, and every posture and every move was funny, you know. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And the way it's described and the way they talk about him, I believe it as well. Because it's clearly was that's what he did, because people were just astonished.
But how do you think, like, if you could go back in time and watch one of those performances, because don't you think comedy compared to other art forms can date quite poorly?
Not that sort of thing. No,
I guess maybe no.
I think what happens is every now and again it's upgraded and updated and everybody goes, oh, it's there now, and they all move and fill the space that's just been created. Yeah. And we're in one of those waiting for something to happen moments at the moment. You know?
Okay.
And then somebody will do something extraordinary and everybody will copy them, and then we'll be back in the doldrums again. And
what makes you think we're in one of those?
Art forms do.
Yeah. But what makes you think we're in one of those?
Because I don't look at it. I don't take any notice of it at all, and nobody tells me to. Nobody says that you've got to check this. Nobody says that.
Yeah.
You know, the last time they said that it was Stuart Lee and Daniel Kitson. The last time people said you've got to check these guys, and that's 10 years ago. Yeah. 15 years ago. So, and I'm fed up with them two now.
Well, they're two good ones. If you're gonna, if you're gonna stay tuned in to two people.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. Well, it's not about staying into. I mean, that's when I sort of woke up and had a look, you know. But I don't know. It's strange. It's very difficult to you can decode the zeitgeist and then no, you're in Chinatown now. Oh, go on, go to the end of there and turn left.
Have a look at that. Do you ever hang out in Chinatown?
No, not really. No. I did when I wrote a graphic novel about Tiananmen Square, and I had to meet up with a guy who translated all the slogans for me on the graphic novel, and he lived in Chinatown. No, it wasn't nothing to do with that.
I'm just
I
getting
don't know where
hungry.
you
just
love. You don't go out much. You stay and watch it. You do watch it all on here. Oh, is that right?
Sometimes we do it in different countries. Doing an episode in London does seem
really? You get out
particularly lazy. It does seem. I admit that.
Oh, you do get.
It does
out.
seem particularly.
Listen, go to Wardour Street or Maid Street,
right.
but go to the corner of Maid Street and go on, press a button.
Which is the old comedy store, right?
Yeah,
I think we've got it on here. Look. There we go.
There you go. Is that it?
Pre-prepared.
It doesn't look like it, but it once again it doesn't look
down
like
here.
it. Oh, that'll be it. There. See, I think so. Yes, maybe. Ooh, we don't know. It's just it looks right.
There
What's
is.
that say
there
there?
is.
Is that it?
Mid Street.
Okay, go up the top of the house. You see, dead seedy it was. So that would be the old comedy store.
That's the comedy store.
That
All right. Because we did on Martin Sohn's episode, we tried to find it.
Yeah, but you
But we
didn't
couldn't
have
find
somebody who's a nerd like
Well,
that,
you
did you?
know the history. This is
Anyway,
why,
go down because that nobody will recognise that. The doors down around the corner in Merd Street.
all right.
No, you won't be able to get.
Can't quite
But so
get there. Right.
so yes, that's where I went. I had a mate called Ken Robinson, who's famous now. He's a sir or something. But I used to write with him, and he said, "You want to check this? You want to do comedy?" And there was an advert in the Evening Standard or Private Eye or something, asking for comedians or would-be comedians. So I thought I'll give that a try. Failed at everything else. Let's have a go at this. So I went here and I met Alexei. He was there as well.
Yeah.
And so then I saw, and they were giving away Don Ward, who ran it. It was a strip club actually, sort of classy, if you can have a classy strip club, but it was. And it was a very nice room. Inside there was a staircase designed by Matisse going from one strip club
really?
to the other. Yeah, it was beautiful. And anyway, so Don Ward would give people drinks tickets. So if you performed for him, he'll give you 2 or 3 drinks tickets so you could get a drink. And he also then started giving us spare entrance tickets for our friends.
Yeah.
So half the audience were our friends.
Okay.
And they were pissed as well because we had all these drinks tickets, and none of the comedians would drink before they went on, and so they were all it was a that sort of audience. And then they started paying us. They paid Alexi to MC it, and they paid me to be resident. And that went on for about 6 months. But before that happened, because we didn't run that place, and there was all sorts of other sort of comedians in there. Because Don Ward himself was a sort of old style stand up, and he used to get.
Oh, did he get up in the?
Oh yeah, he used to. No, he never got up there, but he used to bring his friends in from the business. So you'd have, and big names, would appear there just to do him a favour. But we didn't have any control over that, and we were still finding our way. So then we opened up the Elgin in Ladbroke Grove. So you've got to go back to Ladbroke Grove, but not street by street, Dave. I know you love it, but
there you go. Look.
Oh, there's the Elgin. So we opened in the back room of the
Pre-prepared.
Elgin there.
All right.
We open. It's not like it anymore.
So this was like an important early.
Yeah, this was a big.
venue.
This was a
Interesting.
squatters' pub.
Yeah,
All the anarchists and squatters and the artists of Ladbroke Grove all went there, and it was just a really down market bohemian sort of place, and with a big back room, 150 seater, but I hardly sat. But yeah, and we started Alternative Cabaret there. That was the name of it was the generic name for the club.
Yeah.
And we started doing stuff in the back room there. A lot of interesting people played there. Heathcote Williams played there. Ian Hinchcliffe, who was a performance artist. Jim Barclay, Andy Delatour, Arnold Brown. Yeah, lots of interesting people. And then locals played there. There was a woman called Ola who played sort of interesting folk songs and stuff.
Yeah.
And Oscar McLennan, do you know him? No.
What did he do?
He was a part of a double act, but he actually ended up being quite a good sort of performance art comedian.
Okay.
He moved things on a bit.
That's what's interesting to me, because these days, like, most nights are like just straight stand-up.
Oh yeah.
Whereas back then it was you had performance artists.
You had things
music,
like I always think of Randolph the Remarkable. Do you ever heard of him?
No, but I like the name.
He was a fat guy with a big stomach, and he used to get a bowl, and he used to immerse his stomach in the water in the bowl, and then and he says, yes, we have suction, and it was just ludicrous.
Yeah. And that was the whole act.
But what was funny, his attitude was great, because his attitude was, this is all beneath me. I shouldn't be doing this actually, but this is the only way you'll laugh and the only way you'll be engaged. So sod you. And he they were continual asides, So the whole thing was beautiful. And very funny, and there was a lot like that. This is all squatted area. This is back to Portobello Road now. You've moved away from the Elgin. I was talking about the Elgin. You just shamble off.
No. This is what we do.
Little routes, don't you?
Because the idea of this is the Elgin's our starting point, right?
It's an advert from
and
Google.
as the I need to feel like I'm doing something, Tony, basically.
Oh, well, no.
But no, the idea is...
No, actually, I mean, to be a good interviewer is quite enough to try and do.
Yeah.
If you want an
Well, let's... I'm just trying to give some people to look at, do you know what I mean?
Oh, I see, yes.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. But we can take...
I'll turn left
Carry
on
on
here.
telling me about the...
Yeah, look. Oh, this is just before Carnival.
Carnival time. Do you always go to the Notting Hill Carnival?
No, of course not.
You don't like
I
it?
live in the middle of it. Why would I do that?
Can you see it out your window?
Of course I can.
I always feel jealous of those people who live on
oh,
route.
really? You have to move out. It's impossible. No, the thing is, on this street, the 2 or 3 days before Carnival, all the bands, the local bands, it's at this street, the bike shop's finished, that's finished.
Are these not here anymore?
No, they've doubled all their rents.
Oh, man.
They've
That's happening everywhere, isn't it?
20,000 to
Look at that.
45,
Yeah,
40,000 they've got to pay now.
oh, my God.
Oh, it's quite a while back, actually. Anyway, yada, yada, yada. What were we talking about? No, just before Carnival, they rehearse on the streets late at night, and there's there's smoke and beer around, and it's just a very nice.
Oh, so you get to see like
it's a local carnival,
version. Oh,
yeah,
that's
of
good.
course.
That's much better, man.
Oh yeah, of course it is, and there's no sort of Jamaican sound system. There's just the lesser islands with steel bands.
Maybe I'll
which
go
is
there
far
next
more
time.
interesting.
Yeah.
I don't want to knock Jamaicans, but I don't like the music so much.
No?
I like
Not a reggae guy?
Steel bands are great. Well, I don't mind reggae. It's the loudness of the bass.
Oh yeah.
Well, all the houses go like that. You see, one
Yeah,
year
shake
number 2 and number
shake your
4
body.
ended up in Ledbury Road. It was a joke.
Shaking from their
It was
foundation.
a local
No,
joke.
okay.
It was so funny.
I like it.
Oh God! Right, there you go. He's in Tavistock Road now. This is all new. What are you doing here?
So how?
You're just having a look around the area, aren't you?
This is
You're
what we
just
do, man.
casing joints. That's what you're doing, isn't
exactly.
it?
What do you reckon?
Get
Do you wanna
out!
rob-
No,
do you wanna
stop
rob
it!
these
Don't
ones?
do that. People live there. Don't do that. It's
Oh yeah,
terrible.
privacy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Privacy.
So where are you going now?
That's a dead end. I can't go any further.
That's where's this?
Let's go back to our Spa Fields. We wanted to talk about.
Fields.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, when Joseph Grimaldi was around,
Yep.
he would run from Sadler's Wells Theatre, which is right up there. Don't go there, Dave. Don't.
I won't. Where are these anyway? These must be filming.
I
something.
don't know. There's some film crew doing an advert.
All right.
I don't know.
Google Street View.
Shop.
So he used to.
And he used to run from Sadler's Wells to talk about running between gigs, from Sadler's Wells to Drury Lane. And he used to run between.
Which is
them.
what we're going to do right now.
No, yeah. Well, you could. That would be very nice. We should have done that. Well, let's do
We
that.
could still
let's
do that.
come
All right.
back and do that one day. Yeah. But what he did, and all this was fields, right? Spa Fields.
Yeah.
And when Grimaldi became famous, all the people from the London theatre scene would come to Sadler's Wells to see him. But what they didn't know is they had to, all the their carriages would have to be guarded by armed guards.
Really?
Yeah,
because it's such a rough area.
Because not a rough area. There was highwaymen. This is fields.
Yeah.
See? I mean, Islington was a village outside of London, north of London. But what you've got on here, I don't know.
Where is Sadler? I'm trying to find the Sadler's Wells.
Well, where are you? I mean,
I sort of went round the corner a little
Oh, I see. You're there now. Oh, it's north. Go north. That's Northampton Road.
Let's have
That
a
used
look
to
on
be
that. We'll
Baines
cheat
Road.
and look on the map.
Oh,
I know you're getting
yes,
upset with my
no, there you
clicking.
go. Sparfields is there, you see. And then
Sparfields.
north. Go north. North. That's straight up, Dave.
Oh, I'm going up.
Yeah, go up.
This way?
Yeah, no, up on the map. Tell him he's going down.
Even
He's
further?
gone south now. I think.
Oh, there it is. There. Oh, so it's quite.
done.
So it's
No,
not that
it's-
close.
well,
Yeah,
someone's
yeah.
written Sadler's Wells.
I've got it.
What are you going to do there? Oh, you can just go there.
You just click right on it.
There you go.
Here we go. Here's, it must be around here. Is that it?
No, that's the side of it.
That's it. Yeah,
That's the side of
Cool.
Sadler's Wells. So
I know.
Grimaldi worked at Sadler's Wells as well.
I actually went here recently in real life. So.
But to understand it, you've got to read the book. There's a very good book by I can't remember his name. So that's Sadler's Wells. He would run from here to Drury Lane in 11 minutes. Right, takes me 2 hours to walk it and talk to people at the same time.
Wow, that's impressive. So were you doing? You told me you were running a London walking tour, right?
Wow, I'd stopped
in real life, not
in real life. I was doing a London walk from Sadler's Wells to Drury Lane, but I stopped doing it because the chronology didn't match up with the geography. So I'd start one place and I'd say, "Oh, we need to go to the other side of London now," because
a bit like this. So you see how hard it is now.
Not
as easy as it looks.
Well, yes, you're just giving me an idea of how to do it. Actually, I'm going to nick your idea. I think. Yeah.
So that's.
But I mean,
yeah. So what did you talk about on that walk? What are some interesting facts about?
I
don't want you to give away all your.
Apart from the fact that these are almost contemporary. These are Georgian houses, and they're on the end of that street there, St John Street there. But yeah.
What do you think about the current comedy scene? Then you said you don't pay it too much attention.
I don't. No. I think what's going on is there's some quite good American sitcoms that I watch.
Oh yeah. Which ones do you like?
I liked the ones with the scientists all live together in a flat. What's that? Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang. All right.
I think that's so well.
Big Bang guy.
So well structured and it's
a lot of jokes. That's for sure. It's very
very
bang,
clever,
bang, bang.
but it comes out of character. That's the difference, you see. So. But see, Grimaldi it came out of who he was.
Yeah. And that's what your book was all about.
Yeah.
All about, right? Attitude.
That's
want to make something of
it. Yeah. It's comedy comes from character and comes from personality. It doesn't, and comes from truth. If you manage to squeeze your truth in somewhere and get it juxtaposed with the nonsense that everybody else talks and the nonsense that you talk, and then you suddenly give the truth.
And what was your truth? Would you say? I know that's quite hard to sum up. Or is it something?
My truth is I had great moral dilemmas about things. I think, and a dilemma it's there in itself, isn't it? So one part of the dilemma is the setup, and the other part of the dilemma is the punchline, and you've got it, or the punch.
Yeah.
Being as though it could be a look rather than anything else, rather than a line.
And I've again sort of talking about the differences between like comedy now and sort of when you started doing it. I get the impression from other people I've spoken to, there's way more raucous. Like the audiences now are much more sort of like tame and.
I think it depends on the club, because there was clubs where you would sit silently and listen and behave yourself, and there were other clubs, like the Tunnel Club you mentioned earlier, off camera, because I didn't want to talk about it much, but which was a sort of rowdy. What the most interesting thing about the Tunnel Club was the sort of sophistication of the audience, really, who had just seen everything and knew their own power,
So when you say sophisticated, you mean like they were?
Well, they're sophisticated in the fact they knew about comedy, and they knew their own power within the situation, and I was, I was sitting in the comedy in the Tunnel Club one day, and some bloke just said, "Who's this then, George?" And just out of the blue, in the silent moment, and the guy the other side of the room said, "Oh, he's talking about his bird." And I thought, what? And everyone's laughing. "Oh, do we know her?" And it's like, what?
They're just having their own conversation.
Suddenly, this beautiful double act suddenly starts. And the guy on stage, who was, I tell you, Frank Macaulay. Do you know Fred Macaulay?
I know the name, yeah.
He was on stage and he just like, he just had never come across it. He was totally totaled, he was. But that room was, and the sort of the whispering, they all used to start whispering, or they all used to start doing various things, and Malcolm would just go on there and go, "Ooh, that was shit, wasn't it?"
Yeah.
Anyway, the next one might be better or not, we don't know.
There's all stuff like that you'd never get these days. I think if a compare did that now, if they said that guy was a bit shit,
well,
that'd be very
but he then said or not, it depends. He'd done it that many times that he'd had lots of little codas and clauses, he said. I mean, he wasn't just blatant. That's what You see the way you repeat things, and you just trivialise them, don't you? I don't know. And they wonder why the state of comedy's the way it is. Especially when they spend their time just
clicking around,
wandering around the centre of streets.
Do you like walking? Do you like walking in real?
Not in the
in
middle,
real life?
Not in the middle of the road. I don't know. No, I tend towards the pavement. Me.
Luckily, this is a frozen moment in time. So
good. Yes. Well,
we are quite.
I don't know where
we are quite safe.
We're probably in Watford or something. We've just been
I
going
think
north.
it could be anywhere. Oh, Holloway Road. No, we're not that far.
Oh, well.
So what? So when was the last time you performed what you would call a stand-up show? Because you mainly just do Speaker's Corner now, right?
No, well, yes, but I'm doing a gig at the weekend. Actually, I'm doing the Brewery Theatre Kendal. I'm emceeing.
There we go.
Yeah.
So you're still there. So you're still.
No. I'm just doing I'm just introducing people. It's But I've stopped doing it. It's too much like hard work. I just don't like hard work. I find it very difficult. But I stopped doing it. Yeah.
And but do you miss it ever?
Yeah, of course I do. I tell you what annoys me is I've got asphasia or something, and I keep coming out the wrong word. You'll notice I say a word and it's the wrong word.
I didn't notice at all.
Well, I know. I didn't
notice at all.
It stops my flow. That's why I suddenly go silent. I think, what am I doing?
Is that what that's called?
Stuck in this bloke's bedroom.
I wonder what I'm doing. I don't know.
I'm wondering what else goes here on other nights.
It does look, for people at home, this does look.
Yeah.
We do this in my bedroom, so it looks like a pornography shoot.
It looks like.
So I had to.
Yeah. Now we're in Holloway. Yeah. Yes.
Holloway.
Okay. Right.
So is there anywhere else in London you would like to look at before we wrap it up?
Oh, I see. We're going to wrap it up now. We should go to the other end of Grimaldi's Walk. Go to Drury Lane Theatre.
Drury Lane.
Yeah. I don't feel as if I've talked about him properly.
Theatre.
I feel I've just.
Well, you tell us why Grimaldi? What is it? Because there's lots of comics. I don't know. I just from me and other of my friends, we don't necessarily. I'm interviewing you because I'm interested in sort of the 80s and 70s, but like 200 years ago.
Yeah.
To me, seems so.
He was described as
distant.
Part child, part nightmare. So he
Really?
had this really outrageous clown that was capable of just about anything in a sort of cartoon way, and would walk on stage with like salmon and turkeys hanging out of his pockets, and as if he'd just walked out off a riot in the street, because the streets were just alive with energy, because at the time there was no police force, and that the upper classes wouldn't allow there to be a police force because they wanted England to be free. And of course, so then they were stuck with the consequences of that. They were stuck with a sort of impending riots on the street, and they had their own policemen. But so Grimaldi looked as if and behaved as if he just walked off the street in this sort of madhouse, really.
And is there lots of things, based on my brief bit of research, there's stuff that...
So that was Drury Lane Theatre. If you go to the bottom of there, you go to the corner of there and then turn right and go down there.
Down here, yeah.
Well, it doesn't look like that, but it is that. Go down there. Only 200 yards.
It won't let me.
Difficult.
Sometimes it doesn't. Here we go. I've done it.
And that,
if I was in real life,
see, that is Covent Garden.
Okay.
And that's where he did his Mother Goose. He was in the pantomime Mother Goose. And it took place there.
And
and that's in 1806.
Was he one of the first guys to do that face makeup?
No. He nicked that off a Frenchman called Dubois.
Oh, really?
But he was mentored by Dubois, so he thought. And the reason Dubois did it because he worked in the news. There was new circuses, and the circus where that would have held 4,000 people at the time, but the circuses held that many, but not so contained. And to get to the back of the upper circle. If you wore white and then vivid makeup on top of
Yeah,
white.
yeah, pops out more.
You could be seen.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what Grimaldi did. But he wore extraordinary makeup. And then see the triangles there. Those triangles, well, he painted them red, so not that his face would light up and distort and whatever. So yeah, and as I say, he had a tongue in every limb. You know, he could. I mean, because he was brought up by a father who was steeped in commedia dell'arte history. His body would, every posture would speak something. So he could walk, and they weren't allowed to speak. No man stand-up comedy. They're walking on stage.
I didn't speak at all.
They're using mime, so they go. So it's all happening.
Yeah.
I mean, they're singing and they're coming out with words and stuff, but mostly it's done with gesture, posture. So the whole thing is just another world, really, you know. So and he sort of created this whole atmosphere, and he echoed the atmosphere that was in the room. I mean, they've got spikes in front of the stage so people can't clamber over right in this theatre.
So how do you think that compared to like the early Comedy Store? more raucous, it sounds like.
I don't know. It clearly is. It clearly is scary, isn't it, when you talk about it in those terms? And there never was that in the Comedy Store, but they certainly had bouncers who would throw people out.
Yeah.
And both the Comedy Store and the Malcolm Hardy's club and the Elgin too. The Elgin was pretty wild as well.
Pretty brutal.
But that was because people were heckling you for your politics and for your ideas. They just theatre was, or that sort of thing was just a chance to sort of discuss things and shout in public and argue in public. So you'd have that as well. So yes, I suppose you haven't got that now, although I haven't really checked. But worry not. Although I do understand that there's, we put a rap thing on once, and it was half the audience and half the people were black, and a young blonde girl won the rap slam.
Oh really? Where was that? In the Elgin?
And it was, what's her name? Kate Tempest.
Oh yeah, she won that big music award, didn't she? Yeah.
And she was fabulous, you know.
She's very good.
And the whole audience voted for her, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like and that was a hoot, you know. It was really rowdy and there was a lot of support, but there was also a lot of sort of tension and. You know, so it's, you know, I think you've just got to find it. I don't think it's in comedy at the moment. I think it's somewhere else. Because also someone took me to a club and there was these guys on stage and they were coming out with some awful stuff, but they were just slagging off each other's family and their mothers and stuff. You know, it was rap, and it was just. I thought, wow, this is just. I don't like it particularly, but you know, I've got some energy
rap
about
battles.
it.
Yeah.
And it was. I really liked it.
As you say, it's like a constant flow, isn't it? Where's the next
I like
thing
the energy, you know.
And that's the thing we forget.
And these things happen and they move. So you can. I mean, there was a guy who worked with us a little while ago, and his energy. He was a spoken word exponent, and his stuff was like extraordinary, you know. And people just turn up to see him. Is that guy? Yeah. But it's not comedy, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing we forget, isn't it? Stand-up's such a new... Well, I forget it. You probably don't because you were there right at the start. It's such a new... And the way that we know it...
Yeah,
it's hardly been around any time at all. But then there's this tradition of performing that's...
But did you see the jazz on the this year's Albert Hall?
I didn't know.
That was phenomenal.
What was the jazz?
But it was actually a sort of a look back at jazz done by sort of bebop musicians, and it was screamingly good, you know.
All the different eras.
Yeah. So I think it's you get caught up in things, and then this is the thing, and you go and watch it, and you don't watch it tire, and sort of atrophy is the word, isn't it? I didn't mean tire, I meant atrophy.
I know, it's asphyxia again, asphasia.
You didn't notice.
There's a good club around here, Top Secret Comedy Club, which I think these days that is one of the best clubs.
Where are we going now?
Top Secret Comedy Club.
That's
really good.
They'll all be down there next week, so you've got to be careful. Oh, it's
That's
actually a
brilliant,
comedy
mate.
club.
That's a
Where's
brilliant
that?
club.
Where is that?
On it's like Drury Lane.
Oh,
That's a brilliant club. Big basement one.
Drury
If you're
Lane.
going to watch, if you want to tap into comedy again, that's a brilliant place to go.
Is that right?
I would recommend.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So there's a nice thing we like to do. Here's a nice way I like to end it, what I like to do.
Oh,
Go back to Labrador Grove.
I see.
Is this Labrador Grove?
It looks like
Kind
it needs
of
to be.
Portobello Road.
That's Portobello Road.
So it's a bit corny, but the way I like to end it, I like to say is, if you saw the young Tony Allen walking down that street there,
Yeah.
if you could jump in and be a time traveller, what advice would you give him?
Oh,
What would you say to him if you saw him walking down?
I'd say don't get
The street
old,
there.
man.
Stay there.
No, I'd say
Don't go around Dave's house.
No, I'd say
the
you're
Google
doing
shot.
all right. It's okay. Yeah, it's fine. You're in the right place at the right time. Yeah.
Were you aware, like at the time when all that stuff was going on, because you were right at the start of something really exciting and very important? Were you aware of that? There's something, or were you just going along with it?
I certainly behaved as if I was.
Yeah.
You know, and I suppose in a way that helps it along. But I don't know. People say I do that now, so I don't know. Yeah. I certainly feel that about cryptocurrency now. I certainly feel as if we're just it's all about everything's about to change radically, and all the places that they're looking is not where it's happening. You know. And I happen to be looking at this, and I'm my age, so you know I'm bound to have got it wrong now, haven't I? Surely.
No, I think you might be onto something there.
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah.
Cool, man. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up? Which cryptocurrency should I invest in? Because there's a few different ones, right?
You can't do that. Just understand that Bitcoin was the first, not
because there's that new one, isn't
it?
Not
the current one, and not the. No, there's thousands of them. I mean, you really got to be very careful and read up and read about where you're putting your money. And first rule of gambling is only ever gamble what you can afford to lose, and that's such a definite good move there. So
that's true. All right,
there you go.
All right, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go away and invest in some cryptocurrencies.
I think you're just going to carry on wandering around.
I was going to go here, yeah.
Netherlands.
Can I spend my cryptocurrencies in the real world?
I wouldn't go down Portobello today.
It looks like this is
really,
the type of place.
No, you're going up the posh end now. Definitely turn around.
All right, turn around
and go up the other end.
Turn around. All right.
Yeah, that's it. Go up the
that's it.
Goulburn Road end. You certainly don't want to do it in Notting Hill.
I think that's it for today. Thanks for coming on, Tony. Now all we do is zoom out and look at the world.
You're welcome.
I've been Dave Green. He's been Tony Allen. This has been Dave Green Street View Show. If you're enjoying these episodes, please make sure to subscribe. Every week there's a different comedian looking at different places in the world. He's been Tony Allen. I've been Dave Green. Thank you. Good evening.